Why don't you start off by giving us some background information, where you're from?
Okay. Grew up in Montana, Libby, Montana, and went to college at Antioch College in Ohio, which involved a lot of co-op jobs, work jobs around the country. It's a co-op program where you go to school for 3 months and work for 3 months for 5 years. It's a college that's in trouble right now, but it's an old, radical, liberal college. And after that, went to a graduate program at the University of Washington for my PhD.
Oh, wow.
Got my bachelor's in English and my PhD in English literature. So I went to the University of Denver, where we stayed for something like 16 years, and taught from graduate students to freshmen, and was a freshman English director there.
Oh, wow.
And then 4 years at a private college, Loretto Heights in Denver, which is also an old college like University of Denver, but has since come apart, come unglued. It was a private college, and I managed a counseling and basic skills program there. And then in 1985 came down to Yavapai. We wanted to get out of Denver just so we wouldn't be in the city. We liked Denver well enough. We being me and my wife, Carol, whom I met way back there in graduate school at the University of Washington. And we've been married for some 43 years.
Wow.
And the first semester I was here, I was in a division that was oddly cobbled together of English and math, with all the sort of crazy people on campus. And I became the division chair of that the second semester I was here. They essentially hired me as the division chair, and stayed division chair most of the time until I retired, with a short intermission. When the divisions were restructured, I became the chair of English for a little while, a couple of years. But then for the most of the rest of the time, I was division chair of communications, which included what it includes now. And retired in 2001, just 3 months before 9/11, I guess.
Wow.
Which was depressing. But I've been enjoying my retirement and repressing most of Yavapai. I hike a lot, go to the Grand Canyon still a lot, boat a little bit.
Sounds like you're pretty active.
And I'm taking classes. So.
Oh, very good. Very good. So what made you decide to come to Yavapai? You just wanted to get away from Denver and the city, or wanted to be in a smaller area?
We've been thinking of going further southwest for quite a while, and with the intention possibly of Santa Fe, given all the advantages of Santa Fe. But I saw an offer. It was clear that Loretto Heights was heading into trouble, so I wanted to get away from there anyway. They closed about 3 years after I left. I don't think it was my fault.
I hope not.
And I found an ad in the Chronicle of Higher Education for Yavapai, and had never heard of it, but had heard of Prescott and had heard relatively good things, and thought it might be a quieter kind of Santa Fe. And came down, had 2 margaritas before the interview, and enjoyed the interview.
Oh, good.
And then I got an offer fairly quickly, and we hemmed and hawed long enough that John Haynes, who was probably being interviewed too, called me and said, "Are you going to come or not?" And I finally decided within a day or so after that call that we would. We wanted to get away, and this looked like a good place to settle, and we've enjoyed being here. My wife was an art history major, and she had worked at Denver Art Museum and was, at the time we left, apprenticed to a bookmaker, a fine bookmaker. So she was willing enough to leave, and she's found some things to do here, including managing the college gallery
Oh, good.
and teaching calligraphy for years,
Oh, wow.
and bookmaking.
Wow. You guys have stayed pretty busy then.
Right.
Even in retirement. So early on in your career at Yavapai, what were some of the positions and roles? You talked a little bit how you were a chair. What were some of the challenges? What were some of the most meaningful contributions that you've done?
Part of it was adjusting to a community college and the community college load. Some semesters at the University of Denver I had 2 classes a semester, or a quarter there.
Right.
And to adjust to a 5-course load, 15-hour load, was impressive. And probably one of the reasons I acquiesced in becoming a division chair, because that kind of broke it up, and then I wasn't teaching quite as much. I like to teach it, and I very quickly learned to like to teach at a community college because of the mixture of constituencies, and I always thought of them sort of as, the recent high school graduates, the students who are coming back, particularly the women, because of the nursing program, who are coming back in, older students, who leavened the class, made it much more interesting, and tended to be more serious. No insults intended, but tended to be more serious than some of the younger students, and made some of the younger students more serious, I think, suggested what could happen. And then the special interest kind of student who was just here for enhancement of one kind or another. Made a nice mix. I think the challenges are, this may be involved in another question, but...
Oh, no. Speak whatever comes to mind.
I miss, certainly, to some extent, the research and the graduate student kind of context, but that can get tiresome, too. And I think one of the real advantages of a community college is the focus on teaching. If you can sort out and find, the best teachers, you can get a very good education at a community college, because the instructors are focused on teaching and are not pulled away to so many other things, although the committee load here is pretty heavy. But they're not led to think that teaching is their second job after research. And I think probably another difficulty, though, with community colleges is that they may not have the collegial kind of atmosphere that a good university will have, the sense of a educational institution as a kind of sanctuary in opposition to some extent to the status quo on the culture outside. I think that's what education should involve, and it should give students a chance to live out possibilities and try out ideas and ways of thinking that they probably will never have a chance to do again. And the tendency in community colleges has been to become more like the business model, to become more consumer-oriented in a narrow sense, to teach courses that sell rather than teach courses that pull a few students and maintain a real variety and a lot of interest. I think Yavapai's worked a pretty careful balance of that, but educational institutions everywhere have drifted towards the business model under the pressure of the economy and other things, getting money and the rest. So I think that's one difficulty, and I think it's one thing that attracted me about this English department is that for a long time anyway, they had a kind of college university collegiality about them, and I tended to think of my job as a division chair as providing an umbrella for that, keeping them away from some of the pressures and some of the nonsense that administrations can provide. I hope that goes on record.
It certainly will. It certainly will. So when you first came here, so the English and the math department were together, right?
Right.
They were lumped together. So then how did they go their separate ways? What kind of
well, math eventually was reorganized into science, where it had been in the first place, I think. And English took on a bunch of little collection of other things, speech, honors at that time. I'm not sure where honors is now. And several small things, journalism. There wasn't much journalism around anyway. Right. And there's a sort of a semi-separate reading program, but it's really in the English department. So that collection became a division that I basically chaired for the rest of the time I was here. And division chairs, of course, the year after I left, became division assistant deans. So it's that job, essentially.
I see. So then, how do you think the English department as a whole has evolved over time? I mean, since you retired in 2001, I'm sure it's changed immensely since you began. You see positives, negatives? What's your take on it?
I think both.
Right.
And I haven't had a lot of contact with it since I've retired, although I come down and have lunch pretty regularly with a few people, including my one-time administrative assistant, Kirsten. I think it had a lot going for it when I came here. It also had a few severe personality conflicts, and I think that's one reason why math and English were put together at that point, is they had a few people in them who were hard nuts to crack, and that was difficult and made for some quietness, some lack of involvement on a few people. I think eventually we worked away from that pretty well and became a department that really did spend a lot of time with each other, partied a lot, but did a lot of fairly educational things together. And I became very early on involved in the Gen Ed program, the liberal arts program, to design Western Civ. One of the first, I was in the first Western Civ team after we designed it. I designed the first connections class, although connections no longer exist, at least in the same form. I designed Sense of Place, which was, I think, was the first one taught that and other connection courses while the rest of the time I was here, mainly out of an interest in getting faculty to talk to each other. I think that's one thing that is in danger in community colleges, in pressures and even sometimes administrative attitudes can lead faculty to think of it as just a job. And coming out of a university and a college, I tended to think of education as my life and not wanting to be somewhere where it was just a job. So I wanted to keep that kind of involvement. But I think we maintained that pretty well. Those were rough years. I was a chair through two troublesome presidents, Walker and eventually Doreen Daly, who was still the president when I left. Troublesome in the sense that there was a lot of difficulty, a lot of hard feeling on the part of faculty, and problems along the way, all kinds of things. So it was a job, I think, that became more political in ways that I was sad to see happen. But the college was pretty politicized, and I think it's been quieter since then. It's been a quieter place to work, for better or worse.
So the LSC classes and the liberal core classes, what was the main objective for the students? So for the faculty, it was to bring the faculty closer together. What was it for the students? What aspect of it?
It was to provide to provide all students with a broad liberal education, rather than allowing at least students who were going for some kind of certification or degree or transfer to, stay too narrowly focused. And we had a good success with that program, although the funding of it was always difficult because a team taught course is difficult to fund, but valuable, I think. And our students tended to do very well at places like NAU. They were one up, I think, on a lot of NAU students, and having had Western Civ. I think they often had a better background that included the mix of history and humanities and English and so on that went into that program.
So now they're starting to do away, or they aren't doing away with it, I should say, but they are getting rid of most of the LSD Connections classes, and they're trying to bring in another program. How do you feel about that? What's your take on it?
I don't know what the other program would be, so I can't really comment on that. I've tried to, after a few forays into the politics of the college as an emeritus faculty, which I guess I am, early on I have tried to stay out of it, and I've tried to stay out very much of the English department. I haven't wanted to interfere with people finding their own way there. So I'm sorry to see that what we did achieve cut back. I think the Connections program was a good program, and I think the way we did Western Civ, although it was hard, it was time-consuming and rugged in a lot of ways, and I'm not sure we ever entirely lived up to the potential of it. But I think it was a good program, and I'm basically sorry to see that cut back, but I don't know what is replacing it.
Right. Going back to the politics of it, how did politics influence your job, your position, the campus atmosphere with administration, faculty? What was that like?
Well, there were times, of course, particularly the last semester that Walker was here, when it was very hard not to let it interfere with education. But I think this has been often said, but I think it's actually true that this faculty prided itself on not, to the extent they could, not carrying the politics into the classroom. In some cases, the students wanted it there, and it came. But in most cases, I think faculty kept it out of the classroom and managed to maintain a lot of intensity on education. But it did make it stressful. I mean, there were times, you can delete this, but sitting in front of a president who called a bunch of us to our faces horses' asses would, has an effect on your psychological
definitely
behavior. And, he may have been right in some ways, but I don't think he was a president who was all wrong by any means. But there was that kind of intensity, and certainly it was stressful. I mean, I guess one indication of it is that one very, very good instructor in the English department, who was probably more deeply devoted to teaching than anyone I know here, and whom I would go to for advice, I found crying one day when we started to get back into that political intensity during the Dorian Bailey years. And she was crying because she couldn't face the idea of getting back into that kind of political stress. During my last years here, I was willing to try to stick my, what is it you stick out? Your neck out.
Feet, hands, whatever.
Politically, because I'd been around long enough. I didn't think I would get fired in the last few years before retirement unless I did something extraordinary.
Right.
And I had a relatively, good support on the part of a lot of other faculty, and so I did stick my neck out and probably got more politically involved than really is, my nature or good for me. So I was very happy to retire, to get out of that.
What do you think the community's impact was as far as the administration? Do you think they had any?
Yeah, outside community.
Yeah.
During the period where we were involved with Walker, I don't want to make it sound like my total involvement was with presidents, but or with rebelling against it.
Right.
But it wasn't until the community got deeply involved that it was clear that was going to happen. I think that was somewhat less so during the Daly years, and I think it was because the community awareness of the campus was more managed during that time, although there were certainly community who knew what was going on. And certainly community should be involved in the community college.
Right.
I'm in that position now as a community member coming back, and I feel very good about much of the college and what it offers. I'm taking art courses, I've taken biology courses and geology courses, and partly because I have an immense amount of respect for people in those areas. Some very good people here.
They really are. This is very true.
What's your major?
Criminal justice.
Oh, good.
Yeah, I'm thinking about going to law school, so
Right.
We'll see how that goes. So how have you seen Yavapai evolve over time, like in the beginning just with classes and people and courses offered, and what Yavapai's goals? You think the goals that when you started teaching were the same as they are now, or how have those developed over time as it's gotten bigger?
I think I've somewhat talked about that in the shift and the issues of internal community, collegiality. I can't even.
That's all right.
And the drift of all education towards a more business consumer customer kind of model. It's not that we shouldn't serve students, but at the same time, colleges have to provide a leadership in terms of setting expectations of what education can be. I wouldn't expect a student coming directly out of a high school to have a very full sense yet of what college education could be. And there's no reason they should. I certainly didn't. And colleges have to offer a certain kind of leadership in providing the ideas and goals and role of education in a community, which inevitably involves politics, by the way.
Yes, it does.
And so I think the shift roughly that I have seen happen is my sense of the history before my years here in '85, in the very early years, I think was still colored by the junior college model, which tends to be closer because of the organizational structure and all the rest to kind of advanced high school. I don't mean that derogatorily, it just means that's sort of the model that junior colleges evolved out of. Community colleges getting more involved in terms of adults, or older adults rather, special interests, and I haven't mentioned the vocational area, but I think we've had very good vocational programs, nursing particularly. I think by the time I got here, there was already a broader collegial sense, and a sense of, I think the fact that I was very immediately involved in designing a more thorough liberal arts core meant that the college had been opening in that direction before I got here. There are a lot of economic pressures since then, and I sense that the kind of quietness on campus is both good and bad. It's certainly good in the sense that you can't endure the stress of the kind we had in struggling with the administration intensely during really only a few semesters at the time I was here. But, the tone was there now and then. We can't do that regularly. But on the other hand, I think there are times when things need to be a little more stirred up, not necessarily in the political sense, more in terms of collegiality and innovation and so on. And I think that's difficult to do when you're really focusing heavily on full-time student equivalents, and that may be inevitable. But when you can't run small classes, if you can balance them with large classes and maintain a lot of options for students, I think there are difficulties. And I don't know how far the college has drifted in that direction, because I have not been involved much for the last 6 years, 7 years.
Right. How do you think technology has changed that collegiate atmosphere? I mean, we've gone from, strictly classroom-based traditional classrooms to internet, interactive classes and so on. How do you think that's changed?
A great deal. English department, as a matter of fact, during the time I was here, created one of the first computer classrooms.
Really?
We did it in a classroom in the bottom of old building 3 that where the water leaked through from that upper terrace, and I was terrified that we were going to electrify students. We had cords all over the floor. But we very quick, as soon as we were able, I was very positively focused on the word processing aspect, particularly of computers. That may seem old hat and minor now, but I think what that can do for a writing class is major. If you have people using word processors in the classroom, and then we moved up to the upper floor. I don't know what that arrangement is now. But to be able to do that, and we were able to also to use some package programs, particularly for skills, basic skills, and reading is extremely useful for reading. The negative aspect of technology from an English teacher's point of view is that students have a hard time being discriminate about the information they find on the internet. What's good information and what's bad information, shallow, corrupted in one way or another, unreliable, unjuried, whatever. And it's made it extremely difficult to handle plagiarism problems, although there are technological ways of hitting those problems as well. I mean, one can scan a paper and put it in a piece of software and find where it came from.
Right.
And it's not something one has to focus on. One doesn't want to focus on plagiarism at all, but unfortunately the internet has made, to some extent, plagiarism rampant, and some instructors have almost given up on it. And I think that's a dilemma. There are broader areas of focus that get into huge societal issues. I don't like to see people. I mean, I'm old-fashioned to that extent that I don't like to see people caught up entirely in a virtual world. And while chat rooms and so on have created one kind of new community, they've also created some other problems. But that's a huge issue. It's too big to talk about. So, when I was at the University of Denver, I took Pascal programming that early. That was way back in 1978 or 9 or so. And I was very interested in programs and got involved in programs in computing, and got involved in establishment of a computer room at Loretto Heights, so I was eager to continue that involvement. But I think it's an ambivalent kind of problem now, positive and negative. I can't imagine doing that without word processors. and it's nice not to have to worry about spelling.
Yeah, definitely.
But some of the other stuff is problematic.
Right. Because I'm taking online classes now, and from an instructor's aspect, if you were to teach an online class, you wouldn't get very much. You really don't get to know your students. I mean, you do, but you don't. You don't get to have good discussions or anything like that. So it's just.
Yeah, I haven't really mentioned that, but we really did start with some classes online about as early as anyone in the English area. We did put some online, and there are quite a few online now.
Right.
And depending on how those run and where they're used, they certainly provide opportunities for students.
Mm-hmm.
I would not want to teach an online class myself. My energy fed on interaction with students,
right.
And a lot of the community college students. I think some of them are. Some of the ones, the wilder ones, were the more interesting ones, and I would miss that kind of interaction in a class.
Right.
I was really happy in my first semester here to have in my class a woman I called my Chino Valley biker or something. She was running from the police. Was supposed to be giving up custody of her children and only made it to class occasionally, but she was brilliant. So I enjoyed those kinds of students.
Mm-hmm.
And the grade toward the more traditional.
Right. A wide variety. Opportunities given to you by Yavapai. So by teaching here, being a student here, what opportunities have you been given to grow, learn, just from a student and an instructor?
Well, I think just basically coming here was an opportunity because I had, taught for 20 years in the university and college model, 4-year college model, and I think it was one of the things that's good about a smaller town and a smaller college is that you get beyond your discipline. You don't just talk to people in your own discipline, or at least you have lots of opportunities not to. And I think my wife also found that positive thing to do. And there were plenty of chances to innovate and to create little groups. I enjoyed that. I had a semester off as a sabbatical, and that was certainly an opportunity. Had opportunity to go to a number of conferences and training sessions and things that I probably would not have been involved with otherwise if I hadn't been here. But I suppose most of it is just the incredible breadth of the students. Some of my favorite memories of students were the edgy kind of outsiders again, including a number of Native Americans who just blossomed if they had the right circumstances and who often disappeared. You probably know. I mean, a lot of them don't make it through the semester because there's a ceremony or something that they have to go to back home. And particularly some of the older students. I remember one, Nancy Christ, who came out of a troubled kind of history, and didn't have a lot of confidence when she got here. I was one of her teachers. She was about 40, I think, when she started to take classes here. I was one of her teachers the first semester that she was here, and I very quickly asked her to tutor a couple of other students in the class because she clearly was so bright. And within a year or two after coming here, she was named a top student in the country. Wow. So, seeing students do that was a real opportunity.
Wow.
And I guess one of the other things I should say is just being closer to the Grand Canyon.
Oh, yeah.
I spend a lot of time there in the desert.
In the desert, yeah. It's beautiful. If you could change one thing about your teaching career, what would it be?
If I could.
If you could change one thing about your teaching career, if anything, because, sometimes what? Just one thing, anything that
I could
comes
probably
to
change
mind.
most of it. If I could change one thing, what would it be? I probably would have found ways to maintain more time to write. That was hard to do here, but people do it here, so I wish I had been able to do that while I was teaching. And I think it probably would have been, I managed to write a few articles and was constantly writing small things and, note-taking and doing that kind of thing for, keeping my writing going so I could feel that I could legitimately teach writing. But I think I probably would have benefited from spending more time, finding a way to carve out a little more time to do my own writing.
Interesting. How has the demographics, ethics, attitudes of students changed or evolved over time, from the time you started teaching until retirement, and now as you as a student?
I don't know that it changed an awful lot during the time I was here.
Mm-hmm.
I suppose there were new programs like yours, I think,
mm-hmm.
that brought new students here. But I don't know that the mix during the time I was here really changed a lot. I'm sure there are statistics somewhere that say that it did, but
right.
I didn't
see it.
Sense that. I think we probably, during the later years, drew in some more younger students who, in various programs where they had not yet completed high school, or some GED students, and that may have made a difference. And interestingly enough, some of those were brilliant students. One of them I sort of kept track. She went on to become a Colorado River boatwoman, but I think she may be back in a graduate program.
Wow.
But I think she came when she was 15 or 16, and some of those very younger students were interesting. I don't know really how that mix has changed.
You haven't really seen it then?
I haven't really sensed a significant change. Well, I guess one thing would be the shift from the old retirement college to the various retirement programs now. I think that made a difference because, at least for a while, at least in the English department, there were fewer older students in the regular classes, and I missed them. And it provided also a little less, we had less opportunity to create some special classes.
Mm-hmm.
There were still some, but not
right.
as many.
How do you feel that education, I mean, we always hear on the media and, societies kind of move towards, higher education and, this is what you need to get ahead and this and that, but how do you feel about education in general, not only higher education, but education and how our school systems are today?
Well, I mean, it would be hard to say that in terms of education, including our school system, that we're not in a mess. And all the reasons why we're in a mess, I think, have been talked into. I don't know whether I could go over them all. But in my own terms, I think, although I picked up a fair amount of, had a fairly radical education myself post high school. Mm-hmm. Antioch College was a very radical place. When I got there in 1955, God forbid, it had a young communist league on campus. That was during the Cold War period.
Right.
It was that radical. It had an honor system. We took tests in our room. We paid for things in the coffee house at night by throwing money into a box. And made our own change. And it was that way because there were some vets there who didn't want to put up with a high school kind of college and wanted things to be radical and interesting. And it was radical in a lot of other ways. And although I came out of that, I don't think I managed to maintain enough of a radical edge of education, although I tried, particularly at the University of Denver. During the 60s, it was easy enough to maintain that edge, but I think I lost it in some ways. And I think we need to be looking at real radical education again, education that looks radically at what human possibilities can be in a time when human possibilities may be very limited within a matter of decades, for all the reasons that we know. Political, environmental, and all the rest. So I think education needs to be far more exploratory. I'll put it this way: if I were in a classroom now, I'd probably get fired at Yavapai College because I would probably tell my students that they should learn, if they can, not to be productive. They shouldn't be productive for a system that is producing the wrong things. Environmentally, we're producing disastrous things, and humanly, we're producing things like the Iraq War. So we shouldn't listen to people who want us to be productive. We should learn instead, and discover what values might make us fully human again. And I think that's a desperate need right now. I think it's, I feel futile saying it because I think everything's working against it, except for things happening here and there on a few edges. And I certainly knew faculty here who were trying hard. But I think it's hard to do it at community college, and I think community college students deserve that opportunity. I don't think a student should be politically radicalized against his wishes by any means, and that's caused trouble for institutions now like Antioch, which is on the verge of going down, by becoming monolithically radical. But I think people should have the opportunity to really explore outside possibilities outside what's taken for granted by much of our culture, or we're in deep trouble. We've got to have real alternatives in the future, and I don't think we're going to find them easily.
Right.
And education has a huge role to play there.
Oh, yeah, definitely. What do you think about all the school violence? Do you think that's a result of our kind of cookie-cutter school systems, or do you think it's just a result of society? Or
my sense, and I'm no expert on that
Right,
at all,
right.
and I'm in a danger of here mouthing off too much as someone who's supposed to be an expert. I haven't. I've never taught a lot of people in those, 6th grade through high school, except those who come here.
Right.
And I think it would be extraordinarily difficult to teach in that context. I have a good friend who's teaching in a school now in Boulder, which was set up for last resort students who failed out or knocked themselves out of every other institution possible for them. And she went into it by choice. She wants to teach those students. And it's extremely difficult. I wouldn't know how to do it. I too easily, would react myself. I wouldn't have the patience to do it. But my sense, with that long parenthesis, is that violence is coming out of the culture, not just out of the schools.
Right.
I think the schools are the victims of it. And that may go back to the technology issue. People who experience violence repeatedly, painlessly, in computer games and other ways, are not going to be able to discriminate very clearly about what violence can do when they're feeling rage. And I can understand why they feel rage. But the leap immediately to violence is very frightening. It frightens me. I can see how it happens, but I think it's, there's an opportunity if somebody really wants to make a difference,
right?
is to try to teach in that area. I think it's much harder than college teaching.
Really?
Yeah. The few people I know who are in that area and doing a good job, I think are saints.
Yeah, it takes a lot. What are some things you'd like to see happen at Yavapai that are not currently happening, as far as education, faculty, just anything in general, if anything comes to mind?
Yeah. I probably implied anything should happen. Well, I'll put it this way. One of the ideas I tried to promote in a kind of silly way, because I'm not very good at promoting those sorts of things, was I thought that the college should have a core college, a very small core college that would be essentially modeled out of what the honors program does, but would have a few steps. I saw a center kind of core college, a wider transfer and certificate college, and then a wider band of special interest and people are here for a course or two and that kind of thing. But a core college where people could take special sections of something like Western Civ and a special section of English. Those are available, and honors sections and so on. But a more intense core college, a person who really wanted to try it could take most of his courses in the core college. But that those opportunities would be available outside for somebody else to try it. And it wouldn't include just the traditional liberal arts. That a core college student might be required to take automobile maintenance. Or at least one or two courses like that. To be sure they really were broadly educated.
Right.
And I'd like to see, that kind of a small, intense core college, I think, because there's no reason that people who come to a community college because it's close to home and because they can't really afford, at least for a few years, to get into a university, shouldn't have that kind of opportunity. And I think it would, if it were done more intensely here, it could put Yavapai in the forefront of community colleges.
I agree with that. So what are your plans for your retirement?
Hike more until I can't do it anymore and take more art courses and goof off, enjoy myself.
You seem to be doing that good. Very well.
I got intensely involved in environmental stuff. I had been anyway, but more intensely involved when I got retired and went in and became a member of a land trust and the land trust board for a few years, and that became a little too much. I was getting too busy doing it, but I want to maintain some involvement in environmental issues. But I think at this point the main idea is just to try to maintain some modicum of health, and I have plenty of projects of one kind or another.
Sounds like it. Many endeavors.
I have to travel.
Oh, so what are your expectations of Yavapai that celebrates its 40th anniversary? Just expectations for the future? Any thoughts? Words of advice? Wisdom? You can bestow upon it?
Oh, I can't think of anything I haven't really said.
Right.
I can't think of anything I haven't said. I'm surprised at some things that have disappeared in the last few years. I hope the college will maintain a real community focus. I like the way the plant looks now. I think it looks attractive, and I hope the grounds are kept up. I think they could do more with native plants than they have, and maybe more interlinking of bike paths and that kind of thing.
Right. Yeah, that's hard. Kind of a little hard to get around.
Yeah.
One sidewalk ends and it runs into gravel.
Yeah.
Well, that's all I have. You have
Well,
anything you want to add?
I can't imagine anybody wanting to hear all that, but
No, people do. I thought it was very interesting. That was great.
me slumping down here in my seat.
So do you have some books? Or they have you? Or those are just books you got?
just things I picked up on my way in here wondering. One of them is obviously a retirement book. It's Overcoming the Terror of Death. I wondered what he had to say.
I don't know. Well, I really appreciate you coming and sharing your story with us.
Talking to you and meeting you.
Yeah, same here.